Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good
morning.
You all ready?
Yeah.
To talk about glass ceilings? I think probably as of last Monday, we would have been expecting to have a different conversation this morning, but that may all be changing. So what I think would be helpful is if you sort of talk about the way things are now, and then the unknown, the way things may be after January, especially when it comes to the federal government. My first question is, what are the most challenging barriers and then solutions for African Americans in breaking through the glass ceiling to promote business growth, expansion, and capital? Would you like to start?
Sure.
And introduce yourself.
I'm Congresswoman Terri Sewell from the great state of Alabama. I represent Birmingham, Selma, Montgomery, Tuscaloosa, Roll Tide. This is I just got elected to my 4th term, so I've been in Congress for 6 years. I sit on the House Financial Services Committee along with Joyce Beatty, and I also sit on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which is all about national security, and it oversees the 17 intelligence agencies. My background is I worked in Wall Street for 10 years in the London office and the New York office of Davis, Polk & Wardwell. So I was a securities lawyer before I went home to Alabama and ran for Congress. And I can say that when I think about being an entrepreneur in business, and when I lateraled back home as a partner in a 200-person law firm and was the first black woman partner, in so many ways, I had no book of business, right? I was in New York City where I did mostly work for underwriters like Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley. And they weren't going to follow me to Alabama, Birmingham. And so in many ways, I had to create my own book of business. And when I think about barriers to black women entrepreneurship broadly, you always hear access to capital. And I guess what I want to leave the audience with is access to capital is not just about access to money. It's also access to information, access to people. And I think that, I try to see the glass half full, even after this horrible election. But I see opportunity instead of limitation. And I think that, my message really is about seeing the access to capital is something that we can leverage. And that's really what Joyce was talking about. The fact is that we all stand on the shoulders of someone, but how do we access the capital, that information, those people, that money, and move it forward? And when I think about myself as a policymaker, I think that, I try to remember that the policy should incentivize the behavior you want to see. So if you want folks to save money in order to start businesses, you create a policy that allows that. My bill, a bill that hasn't seen the light of day, but I will continue to introduce it every Congress, is to have a small business startup savings account. Sort of like you do for an IRA, but you actually can save tax deferred $10,000. So that as that builds, that is your capital. That's just one policy. But we all know that the SBA's, Small Business Administration, their 8A certification program is one of those policies that incentivizes the behavior we want to see. And that happens across the board. So when I think about my role on the Financial Services Committee, I think my role is to not only incentivize the behavior I want to see, but I also need to carry my community along with me. Financial literacy is so critically important. And so, I think that when I go back home to Birmingham or when I go in the rural communities of my district, people are just, they don't see themselves as entrepreneur. Miss May runs a hairdresser. She's the one who has a hair salon in the small community. And we've had small businesses in all of our communities throughout our lives, and we don't see them necessarily as small businesses, but how do we scale them? How do we grow them? And so I think that the barrier that you will hear a lot of people talk about is access to capital, and I do believe that that capital is more than just money.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Reed, we know, of course, you're all about finding more jobs for people in Atlanta. And earlier this year, you announced what I'm going to call sort of an incubator for female businesses, female-owned businesses.
Yeah, Women's
So,
Entrepreneurship Initiative.
so when it comes to talking about finding solutions to those barriers, what have you done in the city, and what do you think needs to be done going forward?
What we've done in Atlanta is do something about it. The Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative is just one of many things we've done, but in May, we opened a center that focused on incubating women-owned businesses. What I realized is that women businesses had a challenge with securing space because women were frequently asked to sign a commercial lease. Many women had businesses that were in their homes, which in today's environment was kind of dangerous because you were having to give out your home address, and in this day and age, it was kind of uncomfortable for women to have people know where they live, so I decided I wanted to take that on. And so I secured the 11th floor, the top floor of our oldest skyscraper in the city of Atlanta, a place called Flatiron City. We subsidized the loans to the building, and we took over the 11th floor. And we made it Sex in the City cool, which was my instruction to the developers. I said, I want this space to be beautiful and amazing and to have views of Woodruff Park. And then we had 100 women compete, and they competed through a board that includes people like the CFO of Home Depot, the CEO of Cinnabon, Kat Cole, Carol Tomei, the president of UPS Sales, Gerard Givens, are all on the advisory board for WE. They went through 100 businesses and got it down to 15, Javita. And then they gave those successful entrepreneurs 15 months with no rent, no expenses for technology, an address and an incubation space and a safe environment to pursue their dreams. Today, as I sit here, out of the 15 businesses that we launched, 7 have hired their first full-time employee, and 9 have hired one another. And so these are folks who, when they're growing these businesses, when they want advice on what needs to be done, they're not calling just their cousin or Pookie or them. They can pick up the phone and call Carol Tomei and say, Carol, can I come by and practice my pitch? And so if you go by there, and I would advise you to do it, it is exactly what you should do. And so next, we're getting ready for our new class. So every single year in Atlanta, there is a center point that's focused solely on building women businesses, both minority and women. And so the private sector is just flooding to support these businesses. We also extended paid leave in the city of Atlanta for women who had children. We also passed an equal pay ordinance in the city of Atlanta so that women make as much money as men make in any job in the city of Atlanta. I say all of the time, cities are where hope meets the street. And we're in an environment right now where I think cities represent the best opportunity for decisive action around women entrepreneurs. And since we've opened up more businesses and NGOs are locating around WE. So Microsoft placed one of 4 innovation centers in the world in the same building as those women entrepreneurs. So now they have Microsoft as a partner. And then Grace Fricks brought women's access to capital into that building. And then Goldman Sachs came on board with their financing for 10,000 small businesses. So the point I'm making is despite the terrible result on Tuesday, we need to be focused on doing something about the issues because everybody's talking about GDP growth. Everybody's talking about the health of women in America and the health of the American economy. The thing you can do for the global economy is enable women. That's right. And employ women and give women a fair shot and a fair shake because most women have a child in their household that they also support. And so this is in our political interest to get out here and do it. And we just need exemplars. And that's what Maynard Jackson was 40 years ago. That's the reason why Atlanta is the #1 place in America if you're a person of color for a small business. That's the reason Atlanta has one of the 3 largest African American middle classes in America. And that's why when you spend a dollar with the government in the city of Atlanta or at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, between 32% and 40% of that dollar is spent with a woman, a minority, or person of color.
Representative Hinkler, you are nodding your head in agreement, but talk about the challenges on the state level, because that's where you are down at the Capitol. So once you get out of the city of Atlanta, what are the challenges for minority and female-owned businesses, and how do you help them?
And so I'm glad you asked that question. So I wish the whole entire state could be like Atlanta, but it's not. And so in the state of Georgia, last year we passed a $1 billion transportation deal. And in that deal, what we tried to do was get them to give a certain amount of percentage back to African American owned companies, black businesses, but they would not even hear that piece of legislation. However, they needed the Black Caucus vote to pass the transportation deal. So what we did was we played games and semantics, and so we finally sat down and met with the Department of Transportation, and they wrote a letter, urging letter, saying that they would make sure that they included minorities in this whole transportation bill. But that's not enough. It's not, to me, effective until you put it in writing in the policy. And so I want Georgia to be like the state of Maryland. Maryland makes sure that African Americans are included when they're doing their DBEs. Maryland, it sometimes goes up to 30% to make sure the black people are included. In the state of Georgia, African Americans make up 30% of the population, $64 billion worth of buying power, and we cannot even get a piece of legislation that will ensure that African Americans are included. And so the barrier for me, as I see it, is trying to make sure that we provide those resources. Even when we go on trade missions, when the state goes on trade missions, I very rarely see African American women businesses being included in those trade missions. I mean, sometimes you get to go, Mr. Mayor, but I don't see black women businesses being included in the conversations.
I take black women with me.
That's because you're right. Because you're good. So that's why I said Atlanta could be the model for the entire state, right? But it's not. And so we are always fighting. There's always a push and pull at the General Assembly, trying to just make sure that everyone is included in the whole scenario. So that's a fight every day, all day. But I would say that in Maryland and other states where it's included, the Black Caucus led those fights. They led those fights and they won. So one thing we have to do is we all have to also get on the same page as African Americans to make sure we have the same goals and the same objectives to make sure that happens.
Would part of the solution be a more diverse body of people at the Capitol in order to have those issues on the forefront? Perhaps.
Well, that would happen if we would not have gerrymandered. You know, that last redistricting, I kind of think that has gone out the window. So now we have to just continue our fights on the local level to make a difference. But I would like to say that, at least on my side of town, I don't know how you, well, I kind of do know how you feel. We have 2 new black cities now in the state of Georgia. So I don't even know what that's going to look like in the whole scheme of things now, because they have to start up everything from the bottom. But maybe, I mean, I'm just going to be prayerful that this whole entire thing works itself out. But as far as how the body looks, I think a lot of people are going to have to just old age. I don't want to say die out. Just old age is going to have to come along and move some people out of the way so that the demographics can change.
But some new blood, some new leadership, perhaps?
Some new leadership. But one of the things that we did do intentionally, because you have to be intentional about this thing.
Right.
The Black Caucus, we did put together certain working committees, and one of those committees focused just on access to capital. And so we do have Representative Darshawn Kendrick, who's in the back. She has started a nonprofit for access to capital for minorities that's going to move even outside of the Black Caucus to make sure that we pay attention to this and be deliberate in what we do, and we put our actions behind our words.
Ms. Davenport, you work with businesses in the city of Atlanta. So what do you tell them as far as trying to find solutions when they're trying to grow their business or get that capital that we keep saying is part of the challenge, access to it? How do you help them overcome their barriers?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. The Atlanta Business League, first of all, is an 83-year-old business organization focused on the growth and development of African American business owners. And as a part of the organization, one of the things that initiatives that was created more than 32 years ago was a conference that we call Super Tuesday. And that conference is designed and developed by female business owners of the Atlanta Business League. And while our membership is extremely diverse, we make sure that we focus as it relates to male-female especially, we make sure that there is a clear focus on female business owners. I want to commend, first of all, Congressman Beatty, awesome, and the other panelists. I echo everything that you have said. But what we are encouraging our members to do is to create partnerships as often as they can. Partnerships, joint ventures. Some of our most successful female business owners in the Atlanta Business League are partnering. We see that in our projects at the airport. We see that in partnerships that are focused on security. Some construction, not enough construction, let me say that, not enough in that space. But I think if we begin to focus on that more often than we're doing, we'll see a greater growth. Now, one piece of legislation I would love to see someone put into place, both at the city and the state level, is that when you look at cities like Washington, D.C., the majority, if you are going to do business in those cities, you have to have an office in those locales. Now, unless that's changed, that was the last thing that I heard. Atlanta, state of Georgia, does not require that. And so I believe we begin to require some of those legislative initiatives that we can grow businesses at various levels. But we continue to educate, to bring experts in to talk about what's going on, statistics, how to grow business, like Dr. Danny Boston. I have to give him a shout out, sitting in the audience. But we do that on a weekly and a monthly basis in education, training, and providing access to CEOs in the city. We've even had our CEO, Mr. Mayor, to meet with some of our members to talk and share with them on how to do greater business and more business in the city. And I understand, based upon the survey results, that everyone walked out of that meeting more educated and feeling better about opportunities in the city. But it is a continuous work in progress.
Mrs. Hargrove, as senior advisor in the U.S. Department of Commerce, how do you begin to talk to African American women and minority-owned businesses about jumping over those barriers?
So I think it's echoing a lot of the other comments that have already been made by my colleagues here on this panel, is recognizing that there is a level of preparation that you have to do on your own, not expecting that just because you're a Black woman entrepreneur that there are magically going to be doors that open up for you, but that level of preparation and understanding the systems, and then also recognizing where there are opportunities to find mentors. As a lot of the times, like, you might have a wonderful idea, you might be able to get access to capital, but you're going to find yourself in these interesting positions where you need to be able to pick up a phone to better understand how do you really get over that hurdle. The Department of Commerce, our focus is how do we create environments and ecosystems that support entrepreneurship. That's our focus. We provide investments within communities, working alongside mayors and organizations like yours, where we're investing in how we can provide long-term strategic planning, technical assistance, providing dollars for infrastructure to build out centers like the WE Center that you all have started here in Atlanta that really support creating that ecosystem that will allow that entrepreneur to be successful. And then I guess, since I'm the millennial on the panel, wanting to be able to just think about, to your point around incentivizing policies that will spur entrepreneurs. Student loans are a huge issue for a lot of young folks. So thinking about, are there policies that we could put into place that will allow for us to defer student loans if you are an entrepreneur? We've talked last night and again today about single mothers and encouraging them to become entrepreneurs. We have to talk about childcare and how that is an impediment for women wanting to be able to start and to run their own businesses. So I think it's being able to work with our partners at the local level and at the state level to really think about the policies that need to be created, because the federal government can only do so much, but businesses are created in cities. So thinking about how can we continue to build the best environments for those communities to thrive.
How do you think those programs need to be promoted so that people know that they're there? And that can be a question for the rest of the panel as well, but I'll start with Ms. Hargrove. Like, how do you get that word out to let people know that this exists? And is the federal government at least doing a good enough job?
No.
Okay.
We are notorious for, the federal government does a lot of great things, but we are our worst when it comes to marketing and promoting the good work that we are doing. There are a tremendous amount of resources that are available, whether it's everything from the technical assistance that we're providing across the country, working with university partners, to big programs that they can compete and bid for. So I think it's being able to find those natural partnerships, working with the League of Cities and National Governors Associations, university partners, to really spread the word. Because again, we are our worst when it comes to marketing, but getting on the ground and meeting people where they are. Because as a citizen, your job should not be trying to figure out the federal government. As the federal government, our job should be being able to make this access as easy as possible. So some of the things that we've done is really also through the Department of Commerce, we have the National Advisory Council for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. That is a organization, or it's a group of 30 individuals that represent a variety of different fields across the country that are now our ambassadors out in the fields that they are in to talk about the good work that Commerce is doing and where there are resources, and to help push policy ideas that will help open up more access for capital connections and other things.
Ms. Davenport, you're shaking your head. Do you find that that's a big issue, people just not knowing what exists and where and how to find it?
Absolutely, that we must teach on a daily basis who has access, where can you get money. Those entities that are not so stringent that they're not looking at the big picture, because most of them do not look at it's from the bottom up, how much money is coming in, what is your situation, why you may have lost a house or why something may have occurred. But I wanted to comment, one of the initiatives that the Atlanta Business League kicked off this year, we partnered with the International Franchise Association on franchising. That is one of those arenas that many business owners, small business owners especially, miss. It helps tremendously because it takes away some of the barriers as it relates to technical assistance, marketing, and some of the other must-haves in growing a business. When you become a franchisee, that comes with a manual, if you will, and there's some teaching and training that comes with that, and it's a missed opportunity. We were very impressed and surprised at the makeup of the audience. The makeup of the audience were young professionals who were looking to go into business, entrepreneurs who were already established and looking at the franchise business, as well as franchisors and those entities that provide services, as in financial assistance, legal services, who came to that. So that is a missed opportunity that we really encourage. When most people think of franchising, they typically think of food, and it is so much more than that. And our goal is to ensure that we send that message and reach as many people as we can with that message, that franchising and franchisors are open for business.
Mayor Reed, you wanted to
We
add?
that's actually one of the functions that we will be taking on. The idea really is to create this space. So now we're expanding the area of space so that we can have more social events and gatherings. But the idea is we're now going to grow it past the 15 women entrepreneurs to be a source of information, because what has been happening almost organically is every time there is a major women's organization in Atlanta, they want to go by and see we. So whether it's leaders from South Africa, other countries, whether it's the National Organization of Women Entrepreneurs, they want to stop by and see what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to let folks know that we're going to turn this into a receptacle and a safe space for dispensing information on entrepreneurship for women's entrepreneurs. The second point is I think that the Coca-Cola Company is doing this better than everybody else. I mean, just for some shameless promotion, the Coca-Cola Company launched an effort to start 5 million businesses, I believe by the year 2020, and they're up to 1.3 million businesses around the world. And I actually visited with these women entrepreneurs in Johannesburg, South Africa. So I think being the home of Coca-Cola, we actually have a business that can show us how to incubate women businesses, and that is actually doing it better than any other business that I've seen on the planet.
Going forward, what are your concerns about maintaining that over the next 4 years?
Well, one, I know that Coca-Cola is committed and they're going to hit the 5 million entrepreneur number. Two, they've made the decision to bring the initiative to the U.S. Candidly, before, it was being done in other parts of the world. And so I know that the business is committed and they will achieve the goal of 5 million businesses. So if we're at 1.5 million or 1.7 million today, that gives a lot of runway and a lot of room for opportunities to partner with Coca-Cola. The other part is I think that women have a bigger voice and are more impactful in cities because they're so influential in elections. So even if you might be a dumb man, but if you're an intelligent politician, you could recognize that being a leader in this space of women empowerment in business is a leading position to take, even if you are doing it solely for political purposes. Because if you're in cities are 75% of US GDP and 75% of population. And if you're trying to do a deal in Atlanta, you only need me and 8 votes. So if I were making a decision about where I would spend my time, I'd go someplace where I needed 1 person and 8 votes, and then that could give me a shot at my dream. And then once you have that municipal piece of business, that dog hunts everywhere. If you have a piece of business at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, you're doing business with the most successful airport on earth. You then can take that order and go and compete at any other airport in the world, whether it's Singapore or Cape Town or Johannesburg or Tokyo.
Representative Sewell, did you want to comment at all about the federal government and promoting initiatives and how difficult that is for it to trickle down to the people who need to know?
So I think it's really important that as members of Congress that we promote the information locally. I mean, so for example, the SBA administrator came to Birmingham, Alabama to do to give a check to Innovation Depot. But I took her in the heart of the Black community to talk about entrepreneurship and and she brought with her all the folks from Birmingham who actually work at SBA to dispense the information. So I know that the Congressional Black Caucus has really tried to inform, we try to inform ourselves, but we try to inform the communities we represent. The federal government is a bureaucracy that is sometimes unyielding, and I wish I only had to get 8 folks and the mayor to pass anything. But, we're 435 members, and so often, we don't get things done through legislation, but by using the platform of being a member of Congress, a state representative, a mayor, and you use your platform to promote the opportunities that you want to have in your community, and you help educate them. I mean, so go back to the financial literacy piece for a person who sits on House Financial Services Committee. I went straight to the nursing homes too. Why? Because they needed financial literacy affects at every age, millennials, and we did it through Facebook. Like we did a financial literacy town hall through Facebook trying to get more information on how to save, how to not get credit cards when you're first in college, and just promoting the information. And so I think that it's conferences like this, summits like this that help promote the information, but nothing is better than than success. Success breeds success. So to the extent that you're promoting these 15 women and giving them this, they're leveraging that by expanding the base, by helping others, paying it forward. There's nothing more rewarding, I think, than to pay it forward, because none of us got where we are without help. And there's so many ways that one can pay it forward. I think, for example, crowdfunding and GoFundMe, these creative ways that communities or sets of people can invest in each other is a good way to promote investing and promote keeping our capital. And you also have to buy Black. I mean, look, if you're trying to promote Black women entrepreneurs, you got to buy stuff from Black women entrepreneurs. And you need to make that a point of doing it, right? So that you're putting your money where your mouth is in terms of reinvesting that capital in those kinds of businesses.
Ms. Hargrove, let me ask you from your point of view, how accessible really is the SBA when it comes to providing resources and funding to African American, women-owned, and minority businesses?
So I would preface, I'm going to go back to my experiences working in New Orleans, where I did a lot of interaction with the SBA, because in my role right now, I don't have a lot of overlap there. But I found it to be, I think it depends on who is that local leadership and who's running that SBA office, and how much are they really in the community and really pushing more people to apply to the program. I think definitely the big C that we haven't really talked much about on this panel is credit. And I think that is a big issue around the topic of financial literacy that we really need to educate people more on. And so I think that the SBA is there as a willing and able partner, but there is way more that we can continue to do to work with kind of unnatural partnerships on the ground, churches, different community centers, senior homes, to figure out like where can we really bring people in. And again, I think the role of the federal government is breaking outside of the bureaucracy standpoint and really breaking it into the community. But in New Orleans, in my time there, I think that we were fairly successful in being able to encourage more people to not only apply, but actually to secure loans.
Ms. Davenport, would you encourage your members to sort of seek out the SBA or do sort of that alternative funding, like Representative Sewell just talked about, crowdfunding, social media, Kickstarter campaigns, things like that?
All of the
All
above.
of
And the reason I say that is that each startup starts at a different level. Yeah, family business ownership is not typically a part of a Black business startup, female or otherwise. So there is typically not a workbook that comes from granddad and dad and mom and so forth and so on. So the educational aspect, the training aspect of what we is doing and what the Atlanta Business League is doing and the various organizations in the city, we have to encourage them to look at it from every aspect, because our research has shown that most businesses that apply for a loan are turned down from your basic resource, your banks, square one. We have a great resource here in Atlanta called ACE, Access to Capital for Entrepreneurs. We have a number of other resources where female business owners especially have been very successful in acquiring loans. There is still a huge breakdown at the local, the state, the federal level when it comes to accessing capital. SBA is a great place to go if you are operating at a certain level. But if you are not operating at a certain revenue base, if you do not have a contract at the airport, or you do not have a construction contract, you're almost wasting your time. However, I do encourage all of the business owners to take advantage of the training that's there, because it can only help you to get better as you move to the next level. But crowdfunding, all of those various mechanisms, they are of value for any business owner, depending upon where you start.
You wanted to add
Yeah,
something?
I think also there's like, people need to understand the continuum of capital and what type of business are you, who are your customers, and what type of funding is best for you. I think especially in the sexiness of tech, everybody wants to go and pitch to a venture, to VC or private equity, and like, your business may not need that. Like, you might be able to bootstrap and do friends and family. You might think of crowdsourcing as another alternative, or getting a traditional loan or going to the SBA. So I think there's a lot of education that also needs to be had around the different types of capital, and then also for your business, what is the best type of capital? Because you may not want to give up equity or not have the assets to leverage against a traditional loan.
Representative Hinkler, do you think the SBA is working enough across the state? We know that they're here regionally and they do a lot in Atlanta. What about on the state level?
And I hate to talk when the cameras are rolling. So I think they're doing a good job, but I just think there needs to be more drilling down as it relates to African-American business, in particular women. And so I was just thinking, because Congresswoman Sewell, you said we need to buy Black, but we also need to bank Black, because if we bank Black, then more lending institutions can give back to Black businesses. So we got to look at the whole picture. And so SBA is doing a good job for what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. But more work needs to be done.
But I think the theme that you're hearing is that you can't count on government necessarily to promote it. So we have to know when to raise our hand to ask for help. So often we plan, we are persistent, we do all this stuff, but you also got to know when to raise your hand and ask for help. And then you got to know where to go to find the help, right? And so I think that it's it's series like this that help get the information out. But I also think that we cannot necessarily rely on the federal government, or so thank God we have cities and states that also promote that entrepreneurship. And so I think that it's a hodgepodge of a lot of different things. But I believe that it starts with an idea, and it is and with that idea, people have to be encouraged to try to make that idea into something else. That's what innovation is. People think it's inaccessible. It's not. I mean, someone thought about, these girdles. Spanx lady made tons of money based on the fact that she saw a need, that she saw herself, for herself. So I just think that we make business inaccessible by thinking that to be an entrepreneur, you have to know how to code, or, we really need to make it much more accessible.
Well, then that leads sort of into the next question about policies that are limiting, policies that are in place, in your opinion, that you feel like are limiting, that maybe it's time to get rid of those. Anyone?
Sure. One of the biggest things that could happen is you could increase the amount of contracts that could be awarded unilaterally without competition from 20,000 to 1 million.
Yeah.
So right now, I mean, my budget is $2 billion a year, and to spend more than 20,000 requires a full procurement. That number should be about 1 million, because it causes the government to move slower, and it eliminates the ability to make a decision in favor of a business that's owned by a woman. And if you all can just imagine in the audience what would happen if somebody gave you $1 million opportunity. And the biggest issue that we see with women-owned businesses and with minority-owned businesses is period for payment. So when you have this startup company and you finally get that big order, you can't wait 6 months to be paid. So one of the things we did from a policy standpoint is to get our payment cycle down for 45 days and under. That means that woman entrepreneur isn't mortgaging her house to pay her staff, because she's being paid in 45 days or under. So there are two concrete things that I think we could do. One is increase the period for payment, focusing on women and small businesses. But two, this procurement award level would be a game changer for women businesses, because cities will be where the action is. In the next 12 to 18 months, we will deploy about $14 billion worth of capital. So if you look at the MARTA referendum, which is $2.5 billion, the Delta extension and program at Hartsfield-Jackson is $6 billion. That's $8.5 billion. Turner Field is $300 million. The hotel is $350 million at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. The Phillips Arena retrofit is $200 million. If in each and all of those opportunities there were women businesses getting a shot, I think it changes the ecosystem dramatically and gives you a track record that you can then go to GSK and get an order, because you've done work in a competent fashion at the City of Atlanta.
We want to stay on time and get y'all to lunch on time and the rest of your day go well. So we can take questions now. If you have any questions for the panelists, please stand up and introduce yourself and ask your question. And there must be at least one in the room. Yes, ma'am.
Congresswoman Sewell, we're from Huntsville, Alabama. We're with the United Nations Association, Greater Huntsville. And I just wanted to say thank you. I see your effort, and I just wanted to give you a little praise. Because that grant,
Thank you.
That's nice.
the grant booklet that you send out is very powerful. And to know that your office put that together,
We send out a guide to grants that comes out weekly, and we have over 100,000 subscribers. And I know a lot of it's not just our district, but the reality is that we're all chasing resources, and knowledge is power. Trying to figure out the maze that is the federal government, and when, what types of grant opportunities are available, when are the deadlines, who can you call to find out more information? That's half the battle. So I'm so glad that you use that resource. That's awesome.
And God bless you for having it created.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Terri Johnson. I founded a small nonprofit private school called Global Purpose Academy. I used all of my savings from our 401k. I worked in corporate America, and I saw a need in the community. And I said, you know what? Education is very important to me, and the way that I can make a difference is to impact the community via education. Now, we had some unforeseen circumstances with the school, and all of my money has been invested in materials, supplies, curriculum, paying teachers. I've taken loans out. I now have nothing. I want the vision and the mission of the school to continue. We have excellent results. Our students speak 3 different languages, Mandarin, Spanish, and French. They have taken COGAT exams and ITBS exams, and they're scoring really well. We are really making an impact. We are a small, very, very small school in Lilburn, but we want to make a big impact, and I need help. I need help here from anyone in the room. I would love to hear from you all. What advice do you have for me to keep this going? Because I know we've made a difference. I want to continue to make this difference. I'm very passionate about it, and I believe preparing our students to be globally competitive is critical. Teaching them about multiple languages, about different cultures, and how to navigate in the world with people who are different from them, and not to be afraid to speak up and speak out, not to be afraid to ask for help like I'm asking today. I would like for our community to come together to work on how can we prepare our students, our minority students, our African American students to be globally competitive.
Any of the panelists have any suggestions or advice? Or
Well, I'd like
Go ahead.
to just start by asking you, have you spoken, Teresa, and I know you from your corporate days, have you spoken with any of your state representatives? Have you spoken with your congressman, your senator, regardless of political, which side of the aisle they're on? Because I think there are opportunities there. You know, elected officials want to look good. No disrespect to these two. They want to look good. So at the end of the day, they want to be a part of success. And so if they want to help bring a program along that has brought value to a community, get with your mayor in that particular area together. You go to your state representative, your congressman, your senator, and talk about what you're doing. Because it sounds like you have a track record. Utilize those resources that have been put in place to help us. One of the problems we have is that we do not go back to the people that have been elected to do a job. And if you don't ask for anything, you're guaranteed not to get anything.
Mayor Reed?
I give a little different.
The value that I have in terms of investing and helping me along with that.
I'm just thinking grants, dollars, educational dollars. There's some things that are there, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead and
I think you ought to take a little different approach, perhaps. I think that you ought to meet with the DeKalb superintendent and find out what financing they have for flex school districts. And then I think that you should meet with the superintendent for APS, because they're moving towards models where they're partnering with private school operators. So for example, in the Atlanta public school system, somewhere between 3 to 6 schools in the system are now going to be operated by private entities, although they're public. Given the track record that you've expressed that you have, it seems to me that one, you ought to go meet with someone and point out what APS is doing, point out the track record you're having, and then have a conversation with both DeKalb and APS.
Do we have another question? Over here? Okay, and I know she also had her hand raised, but we'll bounce over here. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hi, Daryl Hamlin, the Emerging Technology Consortium. The federal government now spends more money in grants than in contracts. What are we doing to ensure that our organizations and our universities get a greater share of the federal grant dollar?
Who wants to jump in?
What we're doing is we're bolstering our grant writing department and building up expertise because that's going to be a bigger part of our business. Since I've been mayor, we've secured in excess of $200 million in federal funding. So we actually went in the opposite direction than in previous years. Our federal number through grants is getting larger and larger. I attribute that to an expansion of our grant writing capability, spending the money on the expertise to do it, and then working very hard on nurturing the relationships, and then finally having a terrific president like Barack Obama.
Was there another question? Here? Okay.
Hello, how are you all today? So is there a way that we can pull people together to do this kind of keep our creative talent here, our culture here? There's a lot of black dancers, artists, singers. They're not staying, but I think they want to if there's a way. And then the other thing, what's going to happen with the Civic Center? We don't have a place to perform, and we're like begging, and theaters are taking our money, or either they're not letting us in. It's a real struggle. Urban Nutcracker this year is coming up this weekend. We'll be at the Epicenter, but it's not in Atlanta anymore because we couldn't have a theater here. So anyway,
Before we answer that, Congresswoman Sewell needs to catch a plane. So can we give her a round of applause and thank her? Thank you so much. Thank you. So as she leaves, does anyone want to respond to the question about arts and culture?
Well, one, we did two things. One, we double funding for arts, including increasing funding for battle ethnic. But the next thing we need to do is we need a perpetual source of arts funding. So if you notice on the two ballot measures that we just passed, half a penny for MARTA and 4/10 of a penny for T-SPLOST, I did that intentionally. I left 1/10 of a penny. If we come back and pass funding for 1/10 of a penny, that would mean we would have somewhere between 12 and 15 million spent every single year and have a perpetual source of funding that would give our arts organizations stability, and you would know that you have a revenue stream that would be continuous and that would grow with the city of Atlanta. So I plan to come back as my political swan song and ask for that last 1/10 of a penny be dedicated towards you and organizations like yours. And it'll put Atlanta in a league of the leading cities of the world, which always fund art through a dedicated source every single year.
All right, thank you.
So I just made a little news, by the way.
I heard, I was listening.
I know.
We have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good morning. I'm Agnes Andrews. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'm an insurance agent, and I've been an agent for 32 years. So I've seen a whole lot of ups and downs in the cycle of insurance and financial services. Being from a major company, I get a lot of phone calls from people that's starting up. They're trying to get a grant, trying to get a loan, and the first thing that my rule book tells me that I have to ask the person is, I need to know, are you licensed and are you bonded? So big companies are not that interested in bonding because, to my understanding, they tell us we don't make much money on it. But I could really help people a lot if I had a way of providing them with the bonding that's necessary to get their business going. So that's one thing that I wish that we could figure out how to do, to empower a little small agent like me of 32 years to be able to help a woman that's trying, or a man that's trying to get their business going, to help them to get bonded. So we need that. Also, my idea is that from being around and being a senior agent in my city, what we try to do there is one help one. So if we could have a whole lot of ones helping one, then we could bring a whole lot more on. As I'm an agent and I brought my daughter in. She brought one of her friends in that worked with us. So we just kind of are reaching out for one, helping one. So that's helped a lot. Another thing, when I started out with the company years ago, there was a program that was available to small businesses to help us to get a credit or get a cut on our tax preparation. Because we started rolling kind of fast, then we were making money, and then, I mean, I was an insurance agent, but I'm not a tax preparation person. I don't know all of that, and when I talked to a CPA to find out what it would cost for the services, it was like, oh my God, I gotta go get a loan just to get my tax prepared. So there was a program that came out of Congress somewhere that's helped us with that. So that went away. So that would be great for getting beyond, getting started, getting bonded. Now I'm started, now I'm bonded, now I'm making money, and I got to spend all the money I made to help me to prepare properly so that I don't get in trouble with taxes.
Ms. Davenport, can you respond to any of what she's saying?
That was a lot. And I'm not trying to be, but I would love to know the name of that, the program that you referenced. I think that would help all of us here. But go ahead.
I can't remember the name
Ron Brown.
Ron Brown.
Right, right.
Came through down to Little Baton Rouge that had a company set up that helped us. So whatever my taxes cost for preparation, they paid half of it.
Wow.
So that was really good. And after he went away, that wasn't available anymore. So.
Well, I think what we will have to do is some research in that area to see what that was, because if it was successful, it sounds like it could be beneficial to other business owners. I heard you mention incentives. I think that there are a number of areas where incentives need to be added. We're quick to incentivize our large corporations when they're doing business in certain areas, but we need to provide incentives to large African-American owned businesses. We need to provide incentives at every level so that it becomes not profitable, but meaningful for a business to work with another business. So I think incentives are especially important at every level, even as it relates to a Bell Ethnic with what they're trying to do, that they work closely with some of the larger nonprofits, some of the larger artistic organizations in the city. And if there is an incentive there, Mr. Mayor, State Representative Hinkler, I think that that helps us to grow at each level to the next level. And that's missing, and we need to talk more about that.
Thank you so much. Unless there are any other comments you want to add, I think that concludes our panel. Thank you all so much. We're trying to keep you on schedule as best we can, so thank you for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you.